This film begins in 2008 when South Korea used a jury system for the first time in a murder trial. The case involved a mother who was suspected to have been killed by her own child, who had a disability. In this important and historic trial, the jury was made up of regular people chosen by the court, and they had no legal knowledge at all. This was a big deal and caught the media's attention because it was the first time that citizens were allowed to take part in the justice process. Just so you know, the role of the jury was to look at the case based on fairness and their conscience, helping the judge to make a decision. The main character is a female judge named Jun Gi-yeom. Jun Gi-yeom has 18 years of experience and was chosen to lead this trial. However, when the trial started, Jun Gi-yeom noticed that one of the jurors was missing. She firmly asked for another candidate to be found quickly to fill the 8-person jury. Meanwhile, there's a young man named Nam Woo who was applying for a business loan at the local district office. He was trying to convince the staff by showing his product so his application could be approved. Suddenly, Nam Woo received a call from the court asking him to come for the jury selection. When he arrived, he felt confused and nervous when asked about the law. Since he didn't know much, he answered randomly. Even though he had no experience, Nam Woo was chosen as the 8th juror because there wasn't enough time to find someone else. After being chosen, all the jurors gathered for a briefing. Judge Jun Gi-yeom explained that this trial only needed to decide the punishment, as the defendant had already admitted to killing his mother. After the briefing, the 8 jurors took a photo together to mark the beginning of their historic journey in this trial process. The trial started, and as Jun Gi-yeom opened the session, the prosecutor read out the details of the murder committed by Jin Sik. It was revealed that Jin Sik had an argument with his mother about money. In his anger, he planned to kill her with a hammer and hit her on the head, which caused her death. After that, Jin Sik pushed his mother off the apartment balcony and pretended to call for help, telling others that his mother had fallen. When the police arrived, Jin Sik fell down the stairs and lost consciousness. After 3 days in the hospital due to a brain injury, Jin Sik woke up and confessed his crime to the police. The trial continued as the prosecutor presented more evidence. At first, Nam Woo didn't care much about the case, but he started to feel suspicious. He noticed something strange about how the case was being handled, especially the part about the mother's death. He thought it was odd that she was killed this way, considering that the balcony railing was only as high as her chest. The apartment guard also saw Jin Sik's mother staying quiet when Jin Sik pushed her, and she didn't try to resist. A few days before the incident, Jin Sik and his mother had gone to a service office to apply for financial help after his mother had a work accident. However, instead of getting help, they were given a form to officially cut ties as a family, so they could receive the money. Jin Sik became angry because one of the staff members treated them poorly. At that time, Jin Sik refused to break family ties just to get the money. The scene goes back to the trial. The prosecutor revealed that financial struggles pushed Jin Sik to kill his mother after a fight. As evidence, a family separation form was found in Jin Sik's home on the day of the incident. When the form was read aloud, Jin Sik suddenly became angry and lashed out, saying he was forced to write it. He also claimed he couldn't remember anything because he had fallen down the stairs. Judge Jun Gi-yeom, along with the other judges, the prosecutor, and the lawyer, began to feel overwhelmed by the situation. As a result, the trial had to be postponed. On the other hand, the judges were unhappy because having a jury was slowing down the trial. However, Judge Jun Gi-yeom stood firm, insisting that the case must be handled properly. Meanwhile, Nam Woo remembered he needed to finish his business product to apply for a loan. But since he wasn't allowed to leave, Nam Woo tried to sneak out by pretending he needed to go to the bathroom. While trying to escape, Nam Woo got lost and accidentally ended up in Jin Sik's cell. He even dropped his product, which rolled into the cell. Jin Sik helped him pick it up, and that's when Nam Woo saw Jin Sik's deformed hand, which Jin Sik had been hiding with gloves. Seeing this, Nam Woo started to wonder if Jin Sik could have really committed the murder with his disability. Nam Woo's thoughts kept racing. He decided to return to the courtroom and let go of his chance at the business loan. The trial resumed, and the 6th juror began discussing the autopsy results, which said that the wound on Jin Sik's mother's head was caused by a hammer. Juror number 6, who had worked as a mortician for 30 years, explained that he could identify any kind of wound on a body. He said that the wound on Jin Sik's mother's head couldn't have been caused by a hammer, especially since there wasn't much blood. If Jean Sik's mother had really been killed before being pushed from the balcony, there should have been more obvious signs of blood. However, juror number 6 kept breaking the court rules, so he was removed from the courtroom. This event made Nam Woo remember seeing Jean Sik's deformed hand earlier. He started to wonder if someone with that condition could swing a hammer. Nam Woo asked Judge Jun Gi-yum for permission to test it out. When Jean Sik was asked to swing the hammer, he looked very scared and unsure. But eventually, he swung the hammer with all his strength. However, unexpectedly, the hammer slipped from his hand and hit Judge Jun Gi-yum in the neck. She was immediately rushed to the medical room for treatment, while Nam Woo was blamed for causing chaos with his idea. Meanwhile, the other judges pressured Jun Gi-yum to make a decision soon. Even though the pressure was growing, Jun Gi-yum insisted that the trial must continue because she believed that only by doing so could they uncover the real truth. Jun Gi-yum's determination to ensure that all the facts were revealed showed her strong commitment to justice, even as the situation became more urgent and the other judges grew impatient. After returning to the courtroom, Nam Woo approached Jun Gi-yum and shared his doubts. Even though Jean Sik was able to swing the hammer, Nam Woo felt something was wrong because the hammer slipped from Jean Sik's hand, which showed he might not have been able to swing it properly. Jun Gi-yum replied that the test results showed Jean Sik could indeed swing the hammer, and the trial would continue. Now it was Jean Sik's uncle's turn to testify in court. He explained that before the tragic event, Jean Sik's mother had been drinking with him, and during that time, they got into an argument. The argument happened when the uncle asked Jean Sik to get a job and stop being unemployed, which seemed to cause tension between them. Meanwhile, Jean Sik's father, who wasn't home that night, strongly denied the accusations from Jean Sik's grandmother and others that he frequently argued with his wife. Jean Sik's father assured everyone in the courtroom that he was not the killer, trying to defend himself and prove the accusations were false. When it was time for the verdict, the jury had two choices: guilty or not guilty. They started voting. The prosecutor was asking for the death penalty for Jean Sik. As the jurors counted the votes, they concluded that Jean Sik was guilty, but there was still one vote left. Nam Woo was still confused and unsure about his decision. He asked for special notes to analyze further. Nam Woo read page after page, but he was the only one who thought something wasn't right, while the other jurors didn't seem to care about the facts. After some time, the fifth juror, who was considered the most knowledgeable, helped explain the case in simpler terms. This explanation led to new doubts among some jurors. They remembered that the hammer, which was thought to be the murder weapon, was found a day after the autopsy, and there was no blood on it. An older juror then reminded them that the sixth juror, who was a former mortician, also said that the wound on Jean Sik's mother's head wasn't caused by a hammer. A long debate followed among the jurors, but Nam Woo stuck to his desire to seek the truth. As time went on, a few jurors started to change their minds. They began to doubt that Jean Sik was the murderer after seeing a petition written by Jean Sik's child, which showed how close they were as a family. It was also revealed that on the night of the incident, Jean Sik's mother gave him new gloves, which indicated a good family relationship. This raised a question: why would Jean Sik want to kill his own mother? They began to assume that the apartment guard who saw Jean Sik push his mother's body might have been mistaken. They thought that maybe the real culprit was his uncle, especially since the two of them had been drinking that night. They kept making guesses about the case, except for the fifth juror, who stayed skeptical. The fifth juror reminded everyone not to jump to conclusions and to stick to the facts. In the end, they agreed to do a crime scene investigation. When they arrived at Jean Sik's apartment, Nam Woo found a suspicious note and took it with him. As they went down to the sixth floor, the fifth juror said that if they couldn't clearly see from below, he would reconsider Nam Woo's point of view. The investigation was set up to look like the night of the incident, complete with fake rain. All the jurors gathered on the floor where the guard said he saw the event. They checked to see if they could really see the suspect's face from that spot. It turned out that all the jurors could see clearly, which confirmed that the apartment guard wasn't wrong. Back in court, Jun Gi-yum and the jurors began discussing the final verdict. But Nam Woo stayed quiet, still unsure about the decision. Even though the other jurors agreed to sign the verdict if Jean Sik was found guilty, Nam Woo pointed out that there was no solid proof that Jean Sik actually killed his mother. He also mentioned that the investigation was done poorly. And June Guillaume, feeling the weight of her responsibility as a judge, shared her experience of delivering her first verdict. She remembered how terrifying it was and how she thought about her decision all night. June Guillaume said that this moment would be something they'd remember for the rest of their lives. She reminded them all how important justice is in every decision. In the end, they all agreed that Jean Sick was guilty and would face the death penalty. Long story short, the jurors had spent an entire day on this trial. They were tired and had sacrificed their personal time. Suddenly, one of the jurors picked up Nam Wu's product and pressed it. It made a sound asking for help. This made Nam Wu realize something important, that if Jean Sick really did kill his mother, she would have cried out for help. But according to the prosecutor, Jean Sick's mother didn't say anything. They began to think that maybe Jean Sick's mother had chosen to do something unthinkable. While investigating the apartment, they found a handwritten note. When they compared the writing with the family separation letter, which was thought to have been written by Jean Sick, they realized the handwriting was different. This showed that the letter was actually written by Jean Sick's mother, who might have chosen to end her life so that Jean Sick could receive financial support. Meanwhile, Jean Sick's memory finally came back, and he remembered what happened that night. He tried to save his mother when she was about to do something unthinkable. Jean Sick panicked and called the police, but he slipped, fell down the stairs, and lost his consciousness and memory. Back in the courtroom, as June Guillaume was about to announce the verdict, all the jurors interrupted together. They discussed again and decided to delay the trial, agreeing that Jean Sick was not guilty. However, they were shocked to find out that the jury's decision couldn't be used as the final verdict by the judge. Nam Wu then reminded Judge June Guillaume about the meaning of the law that she had once explained to him. On the other hand, Judge June Guillaume felt unsure, but then she remembered the legal principle she once shared: if there is doubt, the judge must consider the defendant's best interests. With confidence, June Guillaume declared that Jean Sick was not guilty. The jurors felt relieved, and Jean Sick's child, who was present, couldn't hold back happy tears while hugging Jean Sick. Jean Sick also cried with relief. The scene ends showing that the leaders of Korea's legal system were very proud of June Guillaume's decision. 11 years later, in the same courtroom, one of the former jurors had become a judge. This judge was now guiding new jurors, teaching them the true meaning of justice through a trial. And with that, the film ends. The moral lesson from this film is sometimes, if everyone's confused, it's best to just say, "Not guilty," and go home happy. And remember, if you see a hammer, maybe just leave it alone.